do things like that, to have the confidence to fail at something. Fine, everybody fails at something. Everybody get things wrong, but learn from it, move on. And having those permissions, as you rightly say, is really key.
This is the Agency Profit Podcast, the podcast for agency owners that want to run a more profitable business that doesn't depend on them. Introducing your host, CEO and co-founder of Parakeeto, Marcel Pettipaw.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm excited to introduce you all to today's guest, an ex-agency owner, ran his own agency for 12 years, sold it in 2018, now runs an incredible group called Agency Local, which is helping marketing agencies become better businesses and helping their owners become better leaders. His name is Chris Bantock, and he's here today to help us understand how we can transition from being skilled craftsmen to talented business leaders. So with that, Chris, thank you so much for making the time to join us today.
Marcel, thank you very much for having me. And it's nice to return the favour, given that you came to an Agency Local event and shared your wisdom with us.
Well, I have to say that was one of the funnest sessions that I've done. You have a really great group of people that are coming together. They ask great questions. I, totally got to nerd out. So it is an absolute pleasure to be able to exchange wisdom like this. That's been great. And I hope there's much more content collaboration to come between the two of us.
Yeah, me too. Awesome. Well, we're quite synergistic in what we do. So there's plenty of scope for that.
Awesome. And of course, we'll have more information about that throughout the episode and links in the show notes if you're curious about Agency Local. So let's go all the way back to your days building an agency. What were some of the most challenging parts of that journey for you, and what led you to eventually wanting to exit that business?
Yeah, interesting. I think the life of running an agency, to be honest, any sort of business is always challenging. You every day you get a different challenge. But thinking about it, the challenges tend to sort of center around people. And that's creating the culture for people to do their best work in. Constantly looking after people, improving people, helping them to develop. There's that constant challenge of getting clients in. There are a lot of agencies tend to work on a feast and famine cycle. And we were no different really. We had an underlying stream of recurring revenue, but on top of that we had it was project after project, and that is always a challenge to make sure you have that steady stream of opportunity coming in. But I think one of the challenges was around constant improvement. It was just not being satisfied with where you're at, because there are always things that you can improve in the business, I felt. And over that 12 years, we started off as a full service agency, essentially because we formed the agency by merging together three existing businesses. One was a branding business, one was a very technical web development application development business, and one was a digital marketing business. So we had those three key tenets in what we did. Throughout that journey, unfortunately, I lost my partners in that business. They had to step back from the business because of health reasons, which was, again, a challenge in itself. And I suppose, we sort of retrenched a little bit and focused on digital. That was where the market was going anyway. But that's really where we focused. And I sort of suppose I came to a crossroads in that journey. And that crossroads was, I could reinvest back in the business, continue to grow it. but actually an opportunity came along to sell the business. I wasn't necessarily looking to sell it, but an opportunity arose. So I got curious, as you do, and sort of followed that white rabbit just to see where it would lead.
And that ended up obviously ending in an exit. So I'm curious, like, what kind of scale did this agency over 12 years kind of get to? And were there any ceilings that you feel like you ran into and kind of got stuck at along the way?
Yeah, we grew the agency. We were sort of 15 people at our height. 700k turnover type business, which is why agency local focuses on that size of business, because that's where I know, and well, there's ceilings. There's always ceilings. There's always that first up to sort of 500,000 turnover is always a ceiling. There tends to be a ceiling in terms of employees, making that jump from sort of, 4 or 5 up to 10. You've got a very, very different environment to cope with, and very different, it's back to the challenge around culture. When you're a lot smaller, you're dealing with personalities. When you're bigger, you have to create a culture that sort of works without you.
Yeah, it's so true. We see the kind of the same patterns, right? That 1 to 6, 7, 8 employees is kind of one phase, and you can kind of get away with just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, figuring stuff out, taking on projects, and usually that's because as an owner you can kind of use your evenings and weekends to subsidize mistakes that you might make along the way. Like, you've got enough bandwidth to kind of eat that cost. And then once you get past that 8, ish people, so, that's probably where you're starting to close in on $500,000 in revenue. Then you probably don't have the capacity to just like absorb all the mistakes anymore. And there has to be another level of process and people and leadership. All these kind of things have to start to get figured out. And that can be a really tough transition. And even tougher if you feel like you're doing it in a silo, you don't have other people to talk to, have a sounding board. I think one of the things that you mentioned earlier, right, was this continuing improvement. There's always things to improve in the business. And I remember when I was first starting my business, having this naive expectation that one day we're going to make it, right? Like one day, all of these problems that I'm dealing with are going to go away, and the business we'll have figured out the business. We'll have figured out how to do everything, and it'll just be fine, right? And then the deeper you get into entrepreneurship, the more you realize like the problems just keep getting bigger, and the business is always broken. Every business, even the ones that you think, totally have their shit together, there are things that are absolutely broken about their process, about their people, their tooling is a mess, their ERP system's messy. Like, there's always something going on. And the harder question to answer is not what do we need to fix, because that's screaming at you all the time. It's when do we need to fix the right thing? It's the prioritization that can get really overwhelming. And when you're alone and you don't have a sounding board, you don't have examples to look at, it can get really, really hard to be motivated to keep going through that process, to keep coming back to the drawing board and fixing things and preparing it for the next stage of growth. And I can imagine that that's a big reason why Agency Local came to be, because I based on what I've heard from you, we've talked a couple of times, like that probably is what you felt like at certain points throughout that journey. Like, I've got all this stuff I need to figure out, but I'm kind of alone in this, especially once your partners have to step back.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. You're always fighting fires, and it's the biggest fire that gets the most attention. Meanwhile, the other fires are just simmering away there nicely, ready for waiting for your attention. And I think your point about prioritization is really, really key. Again, you tend to focus on the biggest fire, but it may not be the most important one. But I think the bit that's sort of missing is actually what we talked about at the beginning, is that transition from craftsman to businessman or business owner or entrepreneur.
Right.
And it's that is a key differentiator, because most agencies start out life because the owner or the and the person that set it up has a training or a passion about something. I've been trained in design, I've been trained in web development, I've got a passion about photography, and they're really good at what they do. They're brilliant at their craft, so they attract customers, and they maybe take on a few people either sort of directly in the business or certainly work with associates around it, and that helps them to grow and develop. And at some point there comes that sort of moment of realization where they wake up one morning and go, oh my God, I've got a business.
Yeah.
I've never been trained in running a business. And that is the point at which, maybe they're having to deal with these fires because these fires have started to come up because they're taking people on. They've got that juggling act between actually selling and getting the business in and then delivering it out the door. They realize that they've got to do all the finance part of it, all the marketing part, all the people part. They set up the business because they wanted to do design. They wanted to do web development. They wanted to do photography.
Yes. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of best practice out there, which hopefully we'll be solving with a lot of our content over this next year. But you mentioned a lot of the symptoms, right? The symptoms that you might be feeling to tell you you're at that turning point of having to transition from being the expert, the craftsman, into the leader, into the entrepreneur. What are some of the keys to making that transition successfully? And what have you seen inside of Agency Local help folks make that jump?
Yes, I mean, it's just going back to a point we talked about before, which is, it's lonely running that business. And especially if you've got nobody to share your thoughts, your ideas, your problems with, your partner probably doesn't understand what you do anyway, so they can't help. Your family doesn't know, your dog can't understand. You don't want to necessarily talk with other people that do like business to you. So but actually having somebody to talk to about your business is vital. Now, that could be a coach, it could be it could be somebody else that's running a similar business to you. And if you like, that was part of the reason that we sort of set up Agency Local is because, a problem, what's the expression? A problem well defined is a problem half solved. And, just by expressing yourself to somebody and explaining your problem is a realization in itself. But then, then you have another thing. The next step is somebody else goes, yeah, I've got that problem too. And you go, thank God, I thought it was just me. And there's something very therapeutic about that. And then the third thing is when somebody goes, yeah, I had that problem and I did this, this and this. And that just changes, the whole dynamic of what you're doing. And, that is a key element to what we're doing. So if you like, it's a community. Agency Local is set up to give people that space to get to know each other. It's a safe space where you can talk openly. And there's people have to have a certain vulnerability to be able to do that. But also what it is, it provides a space where people can get some of that learning into being able to start looking at some of the key elements of actually being able to run a business, to make that step up to being a business owner, being an entrepreneur. So, that's through running sort of, events like the one that you did. You open people's minds to some things that they probably hadn't even considered. And that is real value.
Hey, it's Marcel here, and I want to take a moment to thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. If you're enjoying today's episode, then I want to encourage you to subscribe so you never miss another episode, and be sure to check out some of the other amazing free resources we have at parakeeto.com to help you improve your agency's profitability. We have lots of other content just like this episode, including other detailed blog posts on some of the key topics, and free downloadable resources like the Agency Profitability Toolkit, which has helped hundreds of agencies improve their profitability with checklists, templates, and free training videos to help you install the Agency Profitability Flywheel all on your own. So if you're interested in grabbing that, head over to parakeeto.com and check the show notes as well. So with that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I'll let you get back to the episode. I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. You know what else I think is interesting about this is like, I've personally experienced this, and I see this all the time, that probably one of the most important things that happens in that transition is that the belief system of the individual changes, right? Like, I think we all have imposter syndrome to some extent. And if you've just been a designer that now has, 8 people working with you, and you realize like, oh no, I need to be an entrepreneur now. And now, the wheels start spinning. Well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't know what I'm doing. And then you get around some other people that are a few steps ahead of you or several steps ahead of you, and you realize that they're all struggling with the same stuff that you're struggling with. It starts to give you permission to believe like, okay, I'm capable of going through this, and I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have all these things figured out for me to just take ownership of like, okay, this is the role that I am now going to need to play in my business. If I want to serve my clients, I want to serve my team, I want to grow my impact, I want to meet my goals. And I think that there's something really key in that as well. And I've gained that from being in groups like this, and it's easy to overlook.
I would agree. And I think the number one sort of thing that holds agency owners back is themselves. It's themselves. It's the confidence in themselves. We've all got these little voices on our shoulders saying how, why are you doing that? What will people think about that? Putting all these seeds of doubt out there. But moving to that sort of positive mindset and to be able to, to really conquer that is absolutely key. Because to have the confidence to go and do things like that, to have the confidence to fail at something, fine. Everybody fails at something. Everybody get things wrong, but learn from it, move on. And having those permissions, as you rightly say, is really key.
So I want to get a little tactical here as well. What are some of those key areas that you see folks really having to get solved in order to successfully scale past, let's call it that 8 to 10 people ceiling, and get through that like freelancer to business owner gauntlet that so many of us find ourselves facing a few years into the business?
Yeah, I think that almost is, to me, is that sort of second stage of growth, if you like, and it's almost where you start to scale. And I think the hardest thing for agency owners to do at that stage, they have to let things go. They have to trust other people within their business to actually deliver what they've been doing up to now, because it's got to a scale where they can't do everything. And if the ambition is to move towards selling a business at some point in the future, then that is the beginning of that journey to create a business that can run without you. So this is where you start to look at processes and actually capturing processes. So the business is less reliant on individuals, and it becomes more of a blueprint and more of a business within its own right. So I think that that actual letting go, trusting people, being far more strategic in terms of their thinking, spending more time working on the business and constant improvement than they do in the business. And, to be honest, it's surrounding themselves with great people. There's that adage, if you're surrounding yourself with great people, you'll grow your business.
Amazing insights, Chris. I want to make sure that I respect your time. I know we're coming up to time here. Any final words of advice for those that are listening that might really be resonating with what we've discussed today?
Yes, always got advice. Always got advice. But I think three things. First of all, if you should learn to run a business as soon as possible. Start learning to develop those skills, find out what it is that you need, what it is that you're missing, what you need to develop as early as you can on your agency journey. Second thing would be, and this was a key learning of selling a business, always run an agency as if you're going to sell it tomorrow, even if you're not, because that means that you're going to be running a good business. And the third thing, get a coach. Get that person that's been there, done it, got the t-shirt, that can help develop ideas, can shortcut part of the challenges that we've been talking about today, can shortcut those through to solutions and really helping you to set up a business and a good business.
Amazing. And for those that want to look more into Agency Local, where can they find more information? What's the best place for them to follow you and what you're doing?
Website, obviously, agencylocal.co.uk. You can also find us on LinkedIn, on all the social platforms, LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is our main area, and Instagram as well. You'll find us on there, as well as Facebook and Twitter.
Amazing. And links to Chris's LinkedIn, the Agency Local social channels, all of that stuff in the show notes. So just scroll down and check those out if you're interested with that. Chris, I can't thank you enough for making some time. It's always great to see you.
Thank you for the opportunity, myself. Really enjoyed the conversation.
All right. And if you're listening to the show, let us know wherever you're listening to this, what you got from it, any questions or insights. We'd love to hear from you. Leave us a comment and we will see you on the next episode. Cheers, everyone. Well, that's all for today's episode, but it doesn't have to be the end of your learning journey. Make sure you subscribe to our show so you never miss another episode. And if you want to get access to more great resources, be sure to check out parakeeto.com, where we've got tons of other free resources, including the Agency Profitability Toolkit, which is loaded with templates, checklists, and training videos to help you improve your agency's profitability fast. And of course, if you like the show, it would really help us out if you could leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might get value so you can help us serve more people. So with that, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.